Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge Company. Ed Watt is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Transport Workers Union Local 100. He's the union representative on the Metropolitan Transit Authority Board. He was elected along with Roger Toussaint to bring new direction and vigor to the union in 2000. But today, I also want to find out what he brings to the MTA Board. Hello. So what's it like being on the MTA Board?
Well, it's very challenging. It's an additional load of work that we have to prepare every month. We have the same complaints, ironically, as some of the city members. We don't get the material in enough time
Right.
to prepare for it. So, but it's challenging, and it's great to be in a situation where you can get some answers to your questions.
Is the statute that set up the MTA specify that the union has a representative on the board?
There's a statute that goes back to the 80s that provides for a labor representative on that board.
And then, is it the same one that provides for a citizen representative?
I'm not sure about the legislation, but it's the same concept.
There's a citizen representative.
There's a citizen representative.
Then there are a governor appoints, actually the governor appoints everybody on the recommendation of different people,
Of different people, right.
So the governor, the governor has more appointees than any other recommendation.
Right. The governor has 6 or so appointees. The mayor has 4. 3 of the county executives have 1 each, and several of the county executives have a combined vote.
Right. So
the labor rep has no vote.
You have no vote, and the citizen rep has no vote.
Has no vote.
But the counties, does Long Island have, does Nassau County representative have a vote, or do they participate in the pool?
Yes.
No. Oh, they do. Okay.
They do.
So the pressures are what? Are they counties versus city? Does it come down to that sometimes?
There's not too much discussion on that on the board. Each of the agencies are broken down and have their own committee. So I also sit on the New York City Transit Committee, and I sit in on the Finance Committee meetings. So for example, Long Island Railroad has a separate committee, and they meet as subcommittees. Metro North meets as a subcommittee. The Audit Committee meets as a subcommittee, and they all report to the board at a monthly meeting.
And so when you have a monthly meeting, do you discuss overall strategy or things that have to happen?
Well, these are open meetings.
Right.
The open meetings law.
Right.
So.
But you have an agenda.
There's an agenda, and the agenda usually flows from the committee reports that happen in the week before.
So is there a strategic planning committee?
Not that I know of, other than staff of the MTA.
Right.
You know,
interesting.
and if people were to go down the road of reform, perhaps that's where you need to reform it, is to give the MTA board members staff.
Right. You have no staff.
No staff, no.
Because you're really not supposed to be that independent.
Well,
I don't mean this as
yes,
criticizing the staff.
Right.
But it fascinates me. I mean, this is an agency that's basically controlled by the governor. The mayor has input into it. It's performing an essential function of providing the transportation. That's really the heart of the city and the state, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, it doesn't go upstate, but this is an important metropolitan district for the state. If they didn't have this.
Again, I'm not alone. One of the mayor's representatives complained that they got 4 inches full of financial text the night before or the weekend before a meeting. So I'm not alone in saying that, why don't you give us a little time to make a decision to fulfill the fiduciary responsibility that they have in casting these votes.
But what I'm trying to say is, we're talking about the MTA because now they're saying they're in great financial problems.
Right.
They face a deficit of what, $400 million?
They face a deficit of $400 million
in
this year, they're claiming,
in 2005.
Okay.
It's hard to believe we're in 2005 already.
Right.
I know when people talk.
Right.
But there's a looming deficit.
That's even worse. That's correct.
Up to over $1 billion.
$1.2 billion, and starting in 06, and it goes up in 07 and 08. Some of the problem, most of the problem stems from the fact that, unlike any other place in the country and in the world, the capital program, the things that you use to buy trains and buses and to build and repair structures to keep the system in what they call a state of good repair, most of the capital project has been financed through bonds that are backed up by the fare box. And these bonds have accumulated interest over time, and these interest payments are coming due. In fact, one of the former chairs of the MTA was upset after he left office. They did what they called squared the box, and they changed the way that they paid these bond payments. And I would liken it to the equivalent of paying all of your mortgage interest at the end of your mortgage instead of the beginning.
You don't pay along. And
you don't pay along. You're putting off the debt and putting
I
off
see.
the
So
debt.
we've been fooling ourselves that we've been doing this. We got this money to do these capital repairs, but we haven't been doing anything to pay off.
Right, and the interest is not coming out of future capital programs. The interest is coming out of the fare box. So depending on which figures you use, it's anywhere between 14 and 20% of every dollar paid by the strap hangers is going to be going to pay for the debt service alone. So a household couldn't live with it, an individual couldn't live with it, and the MTA certainly can't live with it.
So the reason I asked whether there's a strategic planning or whether there are the pressures of counties versus, of outlying counties versus the city, or what the governor is doing, is that since this is so essential to this metropolitan area, and since the metropolitan area is so essential to the state because it's where all the money and most of I think a lot of the tax revenues come from, why aren't those governments putting more money into it? Instead, they've shifted what you're saying, they've shifted everything to try to get the revenue out of the fare box, which means that all of the people using it are the people who are expected to pay for everything, when in fact this is an essential element for the governments.
Right. Well, Richard Ravage started down the right road. He convinced the people in New York, some of the people that are very influential, that a lot of their interests, financial, real estate, et cetera, were not going to be worth very much if the subway was allowed to decay, as it started to in the late 70s. So they got capital plans, and they built on these capital plans. But somewhere in the 90s, both the mayor of New York and the governor of New York started using the MTA as an ATM and taking money out instead of putting money in. And it was done on a gradual basis, and it varied slightly from year to year. And for example, the recent example in 2000, there was a bond reform act that would have paid the interest on these bonds out of the general fund of the state. And that was fine. Unfortunately, it got voted down. So that's a problem there.
It's interesting when you talk about Ravage's saying to the business that this is important to you. When you think about the beginning of the subway system, the real estate people, the express stations were put where they owned the property, right? I mean, they sort of defined it, and now they've come back to it, go full circle. I mean, there's a lot of politics involved in this whole creation and maintenance of the system.
Yes.
The city there's a difference. So you're saying that what do they put money into the operating budget, the expense budget, as well as the capital budget? Did they used to?
At a certain point in time, that there was some money coming in, but no longer. They took the MTA had a surplus back in the 90s. The governor said, Governor Pataki said, we're going to buy new cars for it. So the cars had already been on order, or were already scheduled to be ordered, and he took the money and basically put it in the general budget. Okay, Mayor Giuliani had a problem when they had a surplus. He saw a way to stop paying the full bill for the school passes for the children. So now the MTA absorbs that instead of it had gone through the Board of Ed, some $300 million at the time. So these are all problems. But I think you're right. I think it's a statewide problem. So rather than having Westchester fight with Long Island or New York fight with everybody, I think the state has to pull together, and it has to be a statewide answer. There are components of buses and components of trains that are made in Oriskany, in Plattsburgh, and also the transit problem isn't only the transit problems aren't only happening in New York, and transit systems aren't only growing in New York. Rochester and Syracuse and Buffalo all have burgeoning bus systems. There's a small town I went to upstate years and years ago, never had a bus system. And I went back there recently, and it's got a bus system. So it's amazing.
So now, how are they financed? Are they public? What do we call the MTA? It's a public benefit corporation,
Right.
And are they public? Is that a public benefit corporation in Rochester?
I'm
or
not
Syracuse?
an authority on that, but
All
certainly
right.
but certainly some of them are and some of them aren't. The point is that mass transportation is important to everybody, and as these suburban areas and rural areas have started to turn into urban areas, you have the sprawl, and the right way to address that is mass transportation. Now, of course, Manhattan is so unique that you can have this bedrock down here, and so you can run the subways under it that you couldn't run even as far out in Coney Island. So you certainly couldn't run it on the Long Island Railroad, and I don't think you can run it in too many other places in the state. But if not for the subways, you wouldn't have New York. You wouldn't have downtown Manhattan. The statistics go something like one lane of highway bring 4,000 to 6,000 people to a central business district in an hour, and one subway track brings 60,000 to 80,000 people. So not only would you not have downtown Manhattan, you wouldn't have downtown Brooklyn, you wouldn't have Flushing, you wouldn't have Long Island City, you wouldn't have dozens of neighborhoods, dozens of business centers throughout the city.
And then as the centers of cities outside of New York decay, and they have all the neighboring malls, and they try to spend a lot of money to bring the cities back, they need, again, that mass transit. But that's why I asked originally, is there a strategic planning committee on the board? It seems to me, if you're elected to the board, that there should be who's doing the future thinking and designing these things with that look to the future. We're dependent then on what? As you said, on the
You depend on the staff of the MTA.
Staff of the MTA and the separate staffs of the governor and the mayor. And how do we take, it seemed to me in these fare hearings, in the hearings you had on the increased fares and the closing of stations, that a lot of the local pals went and testified in anger at the MTA and saying you can't do this and you can't do that. But they're bearing the responsibility. I mean, the mayor went and I thought was totally disingenuous when he said, get rid of the fat at the MTA. I mean, that's the old standby. You always can say you can save money by doing this and by doing that. He's certainly not saving that money in the Board of Ed that he said he was going to save, but that's not the answer. I mean, the answer is long-term financing, as you said. So how do we get there?
There's a long-term funding stream that needs to be established. They've done it before with the urban tax, with the mortgage recording tax, the petroleum business tax. One of the questions I get to ask on the board, we found out the petroleum business tax is capped at 5%. So we should enter into a debate on whether it's capped up and down at 5%. So maybe it is too volatile. Maybe it's not. That should be looked at. And then we need other dedicated revenues.
We don't even have the commuter tax anymore.
People are talking about a mobility tax in that it wouldn't be directly placed on commuters, but that everybody who benefits from it.
But it's unfair when you think about it. The increase in the commuter lines and maybe even the express buses goes to not the express buses because they run within the city, right?
For the most part.
But the commuter lines like Metro North and Long Island Railroad, by increasing the fares, it's like a sales tax. Everybody has to pay the same increase. Whereas if you had the commuter tax, and I'm never generally in favor of dedicated taxes, but why not have a commuter tax into general revenue and then increase the share of of the state and the local governments to it? At least the commuter tax is based on income, right?
Right.
It was a much more progressive
tax. Right.
Yeah.
But you also have to look at it from the point of view of who benefits. Employees who get to work benefit, but employers who can draw these great number of crowds that I talked about benefit from it also.
Well, then they should be taxed too for this transportation.
That there should be some nexus to that.
Yeah.
Now that's why the mortgage recording tax made a lot of sense because it wasn't an ongoing tax, and most people when they sell, business and net today with this boom in real estate, make some money. So you're making some money.
We're already taxed. I mean, apartments and.
But it's a transition tax.
I don't want to get into this.
It's a transaction tax. I'm sorry.
Now you're hitting me where
Okay.
It's all right. It's all right. You can do that. So what's going to happen? The union would not want to see stations closed and cuts in personnel because you're interested in jobs. That's what you want to do.
Absolutely.
The commuters don't want to see the increase in their fares. But the state and the city don't seem to be coming up with any money. So how are we going to make them do that?
Well, one of the ways that we've started is to put a coalition together, and the coalition is to keep the subway safe, to keep the booths open, to keep the buses running, and to keep the subway tracks safe. Maybe talk about it in a minute. They have a robo train coming, what they call computer-based train control. But the way we have to do it is that we have to organize. We've put up a website, savemasstransit.org, and we've gotten a whole bunch of hits. There's an online petition, and we have a short-term fight from here to September 16th when they okay the budget. But I think for the draconian cuts that are forecasted for 2006, we have a longer-term fight. And I think that fight will be taken to the legislature.
It has to be.
Has to be taken to the legislature. And even though you talked about some of the elected officials brought some of their complaints and the complaints of their constituents when they have the power. There was two very responsible, I think most of them are responsible, but two very responsible elected officials, Richard Brodsky of Westchester and Kathy Nolan of Queens, came and said, listen, we're willing to work with you to find the way out of this. It has to be our answer. You know, what can we do? But the message that resonated was that you can't go down the slippery slope, especially in a post-9/11 world with security problems. You can't eliminate these token booths. You can't cut service to leave people standing on bus stops late at night. And they have to abandon their vision. The MTA has a vision of abandoned stations. And you talk a squawk box or God forbid, hope a handheld radio gets a signal down there, or your cell phone. And it's just not the real world.
Well, it doesn't make any sense if they have people patrolling and we think that we're worried about terrorism and we're on this alert, whatever color it is, that you then have subway stations that have no supervision or
nobody in there. And what happens if someone gets hurt? Who calls for it? It's a real problem.
But a lot of, there are other expenses. I mean, the federal government mandates different things now for the anti-terrorism effort, and they don't pay for it. Is that what's happened, or do you get money for that?
There's been some money that's come in, and other money that they claim they'll put in capital. Again, unfortunately, abandoned the closed circuit television. They think that'll be the answer, but that's a very little comfort to people when they're hurt. And I'm talking about just the ordinary. Somebody feels faint, doesn't know what's wrong with them. Somebody has a heart attack. You know.
So it's a good time for you to take this to the legislatures because you face a mayoralty election and a gubernatorial election. And I mean, the thing will be that'll have to become a major issue, won't it, in those two elections? Campaigns?
Yes, but again, the answer, we believe, has to be addressed in this coming session in '05, in the spring, in the state legislature. That's where we need to introduce legislation. And we have, unfortunately, for too many years, introduced legislation to make the labor and the rider advocates a voting seat on the MTA board. Maybe it'll help this year.
So let's now talk a little bit about your union and how you got to be the secretary-treasurer of Local 100. In 2000, there was really, well, the union itself is fascinating. I remember Mike Quill. I mean, I'm that old. I'm sure you don't, right?
No, I do. My father looked a little like Mike Quill.
Did he?
With his glasses and
But Mike Quill really was the guy who pulled us together with a few Irishmen, right?
Right. Back in 1933, 34. There'd been, for many, many years, there'd been abuses, employee abuses.
When the Irish came here to this country, they landed up, riding buses, working underground and in the buses.
In the buses and subways. They were all private. They were private companies.
Yeah.
The head of the AFL-CIO, John Sweeney, his father was a bus driver in Manhattan and the Bronx called Mab Stoa, in one of the private companies there. But 4 of his uncles were subway guys, and he remembers going to the bar and having the arguments about subways and buses.
There's always been a surface. What do you call it, surface and underground?
Surface and subway, we call it.
Subway, okay. So Mike Quill started, and so did some of the Irish organizations helped him, right?
Well, all the Irish organizations helped him. In fact, that's one thing under Roger Toussaint that we're trying to get back to, and that is to make the union a centerpiece in the community, and the communities of the people that are working in the subways, and make it more relevant to their work life. So culturally, we've brought back all of the Black History Days and Martin Luther King Day and Irish Day. We call it Quill Connolly Day. Quill's hero was James Connolly, one of the heroes of the 1916 uprising, and Hispanic Day, and bring back all these and give our members a place to come to the hall to celebrate their culture and to celebrate not only their culture but the diversity, which is New York and which is the New York City transit system.
And which reflects the union now.
Which reflects the union now.
Right.
But all along, whether it's Irish or Irish and Italian or Polish, and today we have great numbers of Russian immigrants, of immigrants from West Indians, from the subcontinent, and you pick a neighborhood, and you can almost tell what the transit workers in that area, what the nationality is going to be.
Do you still have the rivalry between Surface and Subway?
Some people make a big deal out of that. It's below there, it's simmering, but I don't think it's a big deal.
Now, you came out of Surface.
I came out of Surface. I'm a bus driver for 20 years in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn.
Manhattan. Yeah.
And how did you decide to do that?
Well, my mother was an immigrant. You take all the civil service tests, and one comes along, and you decide whether you take that or you finish up at college, or you do this or you do that. So there were 3 recessions in 5 years. So you take a civil service job, which is it's important to understand that this has always been entree into the middle class for New Yorkers, no matter what color they are, where they came from, and it still is today. Wherever we go and whoever we talk to, the partnership, for example, tells us that a great plurality of the people that take it. The partnership for New York City tells us a great plurality of the members that take advantage of their housing are civil servants. Because once you have a job that you can depend on, now you can start to build equity in your house, which leads to being able to afford college education for your children, and right down the line. So it is
you're
basically
the middle
the
class
American
that
dream.
they talked about all the time in this recent election.
We're the middle class?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that.
Do you guys consider yourself the middle class?
We consider ourselves on the way to the middle class, I think.
All right.
On striving for the middle class, I think.
But so you're not working poor.
They're not working poor, no.
Right.
Not transit workers.
So, yeah.
No.
So anyway, so go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, that's basically it. Wherever we go, we hear great things about our members, and it's an opportunity for people to who may not be looked on for all the wrong reasons favorably in private industry, to get a job and to be judged on a merit system on your value.
So in your union, you're organized by where you work. Where
Yes.
you work.
There's 7 divisions.
7. So
7 divisions.
like
3
what?
bus divisions. Brooklyn is 1 bus division. Manhattan and the Bronx have another one. There's the private lines, which of course are a whole mess right now. Then you have RTO, which is the train operators and the conductors and the tower operators. Then you have car equipment, which fixes the cars. That's in the barns and in various places, and station department, and the maintenance of way. I'll get killed if I leave anybody out, Ronnie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on. No,
the
please.
maintenance of way. So that's the 7 divisions.
Thank you. So the way the union is organized, the base is the shop steward. The base is the members.
The base is
the employees.
what we call it. Right. Is the rank and file, obviously,
Right.
in any union, and then there's a
And
section.
you have to join the union.
And there's a section.
Don't
If
you? When you have a
100
job, you
Yes,
join the union.
Yes.
All right. So then
It's agency shop. It's a little complicated law, but
that's what it is. So
Yeah.
then each unit then go to the shop stewards.
then you have sections, section chairs. So there's a structure right there. If you have we have 47 sections, and if you have more than 100 members, you can apply to be a section. So most of our depots are sections, and most of the car barns are sections.
And each section has the steward.
Each section has a chairman.
A chairman.
A chairman, one or more vice chairman, and a recording secretary.
And what's a shop steward?
The shop stewards are usually under that. Basically, they're voluntary in our union. There's no designation as shop steward. There's some controversy about making them elected, and we're always looking to see how we could do that, how we could have more representation rather than less.
And then the chairs meet together.
The chairs are supposed to meet together, right? And
what do
run the
they
affair-
form
run
when
the
they
aff-
meet together? What is that called? Just a
Usually
meeting
the chairs
chair.
are a division chair. The division chair is over them, and usually it's a division committee.
I see.
All right, and that could be comprised of many vice chairmen as well, or it could be comprised of all the sections.
And then how does the executive committee get elected? By a membership vote?
No, unlike in the past, we've just changed that, and it's made things quite interesting. But the 7 vice presidents are now elected by division, when before they were elected.
So each division has a vice president.
Each division has a vice president.
That's
and there's
interesting.
But there's only 3 top offices.
Yeah.
So in some respects, it's kind of knocked the vice presidents down a little
Right.
bit, but
And then how
that's
do you
what
get the
people
3
wanted.
top officers?
3 top officers are elected local-wide.
So everybody voted for you?
Yes.
For
Not
secretary
everybody, but
treasurer?
enough.
Well, I mean, enough people to elect you.
Next time, everybody.
Next time,
hopefully,
everybody will. When do you have the next vote?
We were just reelected last year.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
how
so
long
it's
are you
not till
elected
06.
for?
3-year terms.
6. So if you don't get more money in the spring, does that mean that there's a potential for a strike looming?
Well, no,
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I mean, if you take things to its natural progression.
well, you won't have to. I mean, there'll be a lot larger mess than a strike, and
right.
it'll be long term and it'll be irrevocable.
Right.
Than that, we don't want to talk lightly about any work stoppages.
No.
It's only done when
At the very extreme.
when there's a failure.
Yeah.
When there's a failure in negotiations. But at the same time, you
When is
need
your
to be
contract-
ready.
when
Those who love peace should prepare for war. And the same applies in labor relations, unfortunately.
I know it's not sure I believe in that.
You don't
but
like the
that's
first
all right.
one, but
No,
okay.
that's all right. When does the contract expire?
The
How long
contract
are you
expires, and they're 3-year contracts as well, and they
3
run
years.
the year before. They run 1 year before elections.
Right. When I forgot to mention earlier, the capital project, the capital budget goes into repair and new facilities and the purchase of equipment, right?
Right.
But there is some equipment there that the city maintains, isn't it? I mean, you go on some city bridges or things like that, or do you maintain that also?
Well, the free bridges belong to the city, and the toll bridges belong to the MTA.
Right.
Under
Oh,
again,
that's
a separate
right,
agency.
right.
Under a separate agency.
Right.
Of course, there's talk about that being a possible revenue source. I don't know.
And then what happens when they put that? Does that go to the MTA, that you would be the toll collector on those bridges? That's interesting.
That would all be, well, I don't think they're going to come with toll collectors. I think they're going to come with some
With an
easy pass, a
automated
free
thing.
pass, some automated type of thing.
But the money would go to the
But that's all subject to negotiations. Whether the mayor's got that as some sort of his October surprise, I don't know. But they certainly.
So you're working hard. There's this coalition. We've come to the end of this half hour, which happens so quickly. But the coalition is called?
It's called SaveMassTransit.org. It's a coalition to keep the booths open, keep the subway safe.
And it
But
will
Save Mass Transit.
And it will alert citizens as what they can do in the future.
That's right. We have an online petition. We've had a press conference outside the last MTA Board meeting. And people should go online, and if they want to be part of the coalition, they should sign up. And they should sign the petition that's online to stop these cuts.
Right. Thank you very much. Very frightening.